Across the world, ancient places hide stories that time has not erased. Some are grand, some crumbling, but each carries an energy that locals still respect or fear. From cliffside tombs in Turkey to carved cities in Jordan, these sites were built for the living and the dead. Yet the people who live nearby insist they are more than relics. Whispers in the wind, shadows that move on their own, sudden chills in empty corridors, these are experiences shared by those who have walked their paths for generations. Step through these forgotten corners of history, uncovering ruins, tombs, and temples where the past lingers and the present must tread carefully. In these places, fear is as much a part of the landscape as stone and sand. The cursed city of Bangar, India. In the dry hills of Rajasthan, not far from the Sariska Tiger Reserve, stand the ruins of Bangar. The old stone walls rise against the scrub-covered landscape, their arches broken, their courtyards silent, yet even in their emptiness, they carry a presence that makes locals uneasy. People from nearby villages still warn visitors not to stay past sunset, repeating the belief that anyone who dares to remain inside after dark will not return. Signs posted by the Archaeological Survey of India at the site itself echo the same rule, making Bangar one of the few places in the country where an official warning aligns with local superstition. The history of Bangar reaches back to the late 16th century, when Raja Bhagwant Das ordered its construction for his younger son, Madho Singh. The fortified city was meant to flourish as a seat of power, with temples, palaces, and market streets enclosed by high walls. But despite its promising start, Bangar never grew into the thriving city it was meant to be. Instead, stories of disaster and curse came to define its legacy. One legend told among the people describes a powerful ascetic named Baba Balnath, who lived on the hill above the city before its construction. According to the tale, he gave his blessing for the fort to be built, but placed one condition: the city's shadows must never reach his retreat. His anger, the story says, brought down a curse that doomed Bangar to fall into ruin. Even today, villagers near the site point to this tale as the reason the city stands abandoned. Another story, darker still, tells of a sorcerer named Singhia. This man was said to be skilled in black magic and fell in love with Princess Ratnavati, the daughter of the ruling family. Ratnavati saw through the trick and threw the vessel away, and in its breaking the spell turned against the sorcerer. Before he died, he is said to have cursed the land, promising that no one would ever live peacefully in Bangar again. Whether one believes these stories or not, it is clear that something went wrong in the city's history. Records from the 17th and 18th centuries describe conflicts in the region and speak of famine that drove people away. By the early 19th century, Bangar was already a deserted ruin, its markets empty and its houses roofless. Over time, the jungle began to reclaim the land, adding another layer of silence to the once busy fort. For locals, these ruins are not simply abandoned stone. Families living in nearby villages such as Gola Bas still keep their distance once the sun begins to sink. Farmers will not cross the walls at night, and herders avoid bringing animals inside. Even during the day, many visitors remark on the unsettling quiet that seems to cling to the place. Birds fly above the ramparts, monkeys scatter through the broken temples, yet the human presence feels thin and temporary. Guides from the area often remind travelers to leave before dusk, saying that strange cries and movements are heard after dark. Those who have tried to test these warnings have added more fuel to the fear. Stories circulate of visitors who camped within the fort and claimed to hear footsteps echoing in the palace ruins, or felt sudden gusts of cold air despite the desert heat. Some accounts speak of accidents that followed soon after, with travelers meeting misfortune on their return journey. Though skeptics point to coincidence, the tales keep alive the belief that Bangar is not to be challenged. Walking through the ruins, the past feels unusually close. The long market street stretches between crumbling rows of shops where merchants once sold cloth and spices. Temples dedicated to Hanuman and Gopinath still carry faint carvings, their courtyards strewn with weeds. The palace itself looms at the far end, a maze of broken stairways and collapsed halls. These remnants show that Bangar was carefully planned, yet they also mark the suddenness of its abandonment, as though life was cut off without warning. To the villagers living beneath its looming walls, Bangar is more than just a monument. It is a place that commands respect, a reminder that some spaces carry weight beyond stone and soil. The fort may no longer guard a kingdom, but it continues to shape the behavior of those who live nearby, keeping the boundary between day and night as strict as any ruler once did. The haunted ruins of Nan Madol, Micronesia. Off the eastern shore of Pohnpei Island lies a city unlike any other, a labyrinth of stone rising from the water. Known as Nan Madol, it is often called the Venice of the Pacific because its walls and temples sit on a series of artificial islets connected by canals. From a distance, the ruins look like the remains of a fortress, with basalt columns stacked in massive formations, some weighing several tons each. Yet the more striking detail is not only the scale of the construction, but the unease that still surrounds it. For the people of Pompeii, Nan Madol is not simply an archaeological site. It is a place of spirits, and locals often avoid it after dark. The origins of Nan Madol are wrapped in both history and legend. Archaeologists date the site to around the 12th or 13th century, when the Sudelur dynasty ruled the island. Oral traditions, however, tell of two brothers, Olosohpa and Olosihpa, who came from the west in a great canoe. The brothers were said to be sorcerers who used their powers to move the huge basalt columns into place, creating the foundations of the city. The combination of real stone engineering and these tales of magic has given Nan Madol its eerie reputation. Walking through the ruins today, one can still trace the layout of the city. The islets hold remains of temples, burial vaults, and residential compounds. The royal mortuary, known as Nandawas, is the largest structure, its high basalt walls enclosing a tomb where the Sordler kings were laid to rest. Villagers on Pompeii often speak of this area with particular fear. What deepens the sense of mystery is the sheer effort required to build Nan Madol. The basalt logs, as locals call them, were quarried miles away from the site. Each one can weigh up to 50 tons, yet the city contains thousands of them, stacked like logs in a house of stone. There is no written record to explain how the blocks were moved across land and water, and local legends insist that sorcery must have been involved. This unanswered question adds to the unease that Pohnpeians feel towards the ruins. The rule of the Sordler dynasty ended in the early 16th century when the warrior Isokelikal invaded from Khosrei. He overthrew the kings and destroyed their dominance, but according to island tradition, he also cursed the city. The people of Pompeii say that anyone who tries to settle there will meet misfortune. Stories circulate of chiefs who attempted to build houses within the ruins only to fall ill or die soon after. Such tales have kept Nan Madol empty for centuries. Even during the colonial era, when German and later Japanese administrators explored the site, they noted how hesitant local guides were to enter the inner compounds. Some would not step past certain thresholds, insisting that the spirits inside were dangerous. Accounts from the early 20th century mention strange lights appearing over the ruins, and fishermen who claimed to hear voices drifting across the water at night. These stories may never be proven, but they continue to shape the way the ruins are seen by those who live in their shadow. Today, Nan Madol is recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, drawing archaeologists and curious travelers from around the world. Yet, despite this recognition, it has not lost the aura of dread. Many Pohnpeians still approach with caution, leaving offerings of kava or food at the edge of the site before entering. Elders often warn young people not to wander alone among the ruins, reminding them that the city was built with powers beyond human understanding. Even in daylight, with researchers measuring stones and tourists taking photographs, there is a silence that settles over the place, broken only by the calls of seabirds and the lapping of water against the walls. The canals that wind through Nan Madol are choked with mangrove roots, and in some areas, the sea has already reclaimed parts of the islets. Yet the city endures, its basalt walls standing firm after centuries of storms and tides. To outsiders, it may seem like a marvel of engineering lost to history, but to the people of Pompeii, it is more than that. It is a haunted capital, a reminder of rulers who demanded too much, and a place where the spirits of the past still walk when the sun goes down. The forbidden tombs of Saqqara, Egypt. On the desert plateau south of Cairo lies Saqqara, one of the most important burial grounds of ancient Egypt. Stretching across miles of sand, it holds pyramids, mastabas, and shafts that date back more than 4,000 years. The step pyramid of Djoser rises at its heart, the first monumental pyramid ever built, and around it are countless tombs belonging to nobles, priests, and officials of the Old Kingdom. Local villagers have long whispered that wandering too deep among its ruins at night can bring misfortune, and many guides refuse to enter certain passages once the sun begins to set. The reason for these fears lies in the site itself. Saqqara is not a single monument, but a vast necropolis. Tombs are stacked upon tombs, many dug into the ground, with corridors that twist and fall away into darkness. Some contain walls covered in hieroglyphs, describing rituals meant to guide the dead into the afterlife. But what captures the imagination most are the inscriptions that call on gods to protect the tombs from intruders. These warnings were not written for show. Ancient Egyptians believed their dead could be disturbed by the living, and so they asked the gods to strike down anyone who violated the sanctity of their graves. Excavations in the 20th century brought these beliefs back into the spotlight. Archaeologists working in the region uncovered dozens of new tombs, some sealed for thousands of years. Locals watched the work with suspicion, saying the spirits of the dead would not forgive such intrusions. Tales spread quickly when some workers fell ill or accidents occurred on site. While scholars pointed to natural causes such as bad air trapped underground, villagers explained it as the result of curses being unleashed. One of the most striking discoveries came in 2018 when a team revealed the tomb of Wahti, a priest who lived during the reign of King Nefertari in the 5th dynasty, around 2400 BCE. The chamber, hidden beneath layers of sand, was covered in carvings and statues of the priest and his family. For many Egyptians, the opening of such a tomb stirred unease. Some believed that Wati's ka, his vital essence, would be angered by the disturbance, and stories spread that those who entered would be followed by misfortune. These modern fears echo older traditions. In nearby villages, elders often warn children not to wander into the ruins. They say that the souls of the priests, scribes, and workers buried there still guard their resting places. According to one common tale, lights can be seen flickering between the broken walls at night, though no one dares to go close enough to find their source. Others speak of whispers rising from the sand when the wind is low, as if voices of the dead are carried across the desert. Whether these are tricks of the environment or not, they keep the sense of fear alive. The physical dangers of Saqqara make the warnings even stronger. Many shafts plunge deep into the ground, with little to mark their openings. Archaeologists working there use special equipment to lower themselves into narrow spaces where mummies and relics have been sealed for millennia. Without such care, a person could easily vanish into the darkness. This reality fuels the belief that only the chosen may safely pass into the tombs. To locals, the hidden dangers are proof that the ancient curses still hold power. The site remains strictly regulated today, with many tombs kept off-limits to visitors. The authorities explain this as preservation, protecting delicate carvings and paintings from damage. But for those who live nearby, the closures also carry a deeper meaning. They believe that some tombs should never be opened, that the gods who watched over them in antiquity are still present. When archaeologists announce new finds, villagers often react with mixed feelings, proud of their heritage yet wary of what has been disturbed. Walking among the ruins, one cannot ignore the weight of history pressing from every side. The stone walls of the step pyramid cast long shadows across the sand, and scattered doorways lead into underground passageways where the dead were laid to rest thousands of years ago. For the local people who have grown up near this necropolis, those shadows are more than reminders of the past. They are warnings, markers of boundaries that should not be crossed. where the living are wise to keep their distance once night falls. The Cave of Zugul, Ethiopia. Deep in the highlands of northern Ethiopia lies a place that villagers whisper about but rarely enter. The Cave of Zugul is hidden in the mountains of Amhara, and though it may look like just another natural hollow in the rock, the stories surrounding it stretch back generations. For locals, it is not only a place of darkness, but also of dread, a site where the boundary between the living and the dead is said to blur. The entrance is narrow and shadowed, framed by jagged rock and dry brush, and stepping inside feels like crossing into another world. The air is thick and damp, carrying the smell of soil that has not seen sunlight in centuries. As light fades, the interior walls reveal faint traces of human activity. Archaeologists who have ventured here have found signs that people once used the cave for burial rituals, with skeletal remains carefully placed deep within the stone chambers. Many of these bones date back hundreds of years, and some belong to entire families, as if whole lineages were sealed within. Local elders tell of a time when the cave was used by priests and healers who believed it was a gate to the underworld. Ancient chants were performed in its depths, and sacrifices were made to appease spirits thought to dwell inside. Even today, those living nearby believe that entering Zugul without proper offerings can bring illness or misfortune. Farmers working the surrounding fields avoid going too close after sunset, saying that strange lights sometimes flicker at the cave mouth, and the sound of voices can be heard rising from within, even when no one is inside. The fear attached to Zugul is not only based on folklore. In the late 20th century, researchers from Addis Ababa University explored the site to document its archaeological significance. They recorded hundreds of human bones, along with pottery fragments that suggested ritual practices. Yet, many of the researchers themselves reported unsettling experiences. Equipment would fail deep inside, and some claimed to feel as though they were being watched from the shadows. A few local guides refused to re-enter after their first visit, shaken by what they described as a heavy presence pressing down on them. What makes Zugul especially frightening is how its history blends with ongoing belief. While some caves across Ethiopia are visited for spiritual reasons or even serve as homes, Zugul stands apart because of its reputation as cursed. Parents warn their children not to wander near, and travelers passing through the area sometimes leave small tokens or stones near the entrance as a sign of respect for the spirits within. The idea that the cave still houses restless souls is so strong that even Christian priests, usually quick to reclaim old sacred spaces, have avoided blessing or consecrating it. Inside, the passages twist and narrow, with some chambers dropping steeply into the earth. Those who have mapped its interior note that certain sections appear deliberately arranged with stones piled into rough altars. Candle wax has been found on ledges, a sign that people have continued to visit it secretly. Some suggest that these nighttime visitors are modern-day spiritualists, or those practicing ancient rites passed down through families, unwilling to let old traditions die despite the fear they carry. Legends among the Amhara people speak of Zugul as a place where oath-breakers were once taken and left to die, their spirits condemned to wander in darkness. Other tales say that those who enter alone risk being lured deeper by voices, calling their names, leading them into chasms where no one can escape. Hunters who pass through the area claim they have seen pale figures standing in the entrance at dawn, only to vanish when approached. The cave has never been fully excavated, and much of it remains unexplored, hidden by collapsed tunnels and chambers filled with debris. Some archaeologists have argued that the site could reveal forgotten practices of Ethiopia's medieval period, but attempts to organize larger digs have always faltered. Superstitions run deep, and the idea of disturbing the dead here has kept even determined researchers away. For the communities that live in the shadow of Zugul, the cave is less an archaeological wonder than a living reminder of forces that are better left undisturbed. It is a place where old fears survive, where every story of a strange light or echoing voice adds another layer to its reputation. In Ethiopia, where ancient history lies everywhere in the land, Zugul remains one of the most avoided, a cave that continues to hold the weight of its past and the fear of its people. The deserted temples of Hatra, Iraq. In the northern deserts of Iraq, where the land turns into dry plains and winds carry fine dust across the horizon, stand the silent remains of Hatra. Once a strong city of the Parthian Empire, its grand temples and thick walls rose with power, yet today they are empty, eroded by time, and surrounded by stories that keep even locals from approaching after dark. What survives of the city is not just stones, but memories of a place that flourished between the Twand and Thread centuries, only to meet sudden violence that left it scarred forever. Hatra was famed for its massive fortifications, circular in design, with more than 100 towers forming a defensive ring. Ancient texts say its walls were so strong that even Roman armies failed to bring them down, and within those walls, worshippers gathered at sanctuaries dedicated to many gods. Temples to Shamash, the sun god, and to Nergal, the god of the underworld, once drew priests who performed elaborate rituals. These practices, so closely tied to death and the afterlife, are still whispered about among villagers living miles away. People say the ground within the ruins carries a weight that feels unnatural, as if the gods abandoned the city but left something behind. Ancient Roman writers even recorded tales of travelers who spoke of Hatra's priests practicing secret rites at night, ceremonies that were never meant for outsiders to witness. Archaeologists who came in the early 20th century described how statues of deities with staring eyes seemed untouched by time. Some of these figures were carved so deeply into the stone that they seemed to glare at anyone who dared enter. When researchers worked at Hatra in the 1950s, a few locals refused to guide them past the gates at night, claiming that spirits of fallen priests still moved between the columns. Even in daylight, there are reports of strange echoes. Visitors have described voices that seem to come from inside the empty shrines, low murmurs that vanish when someone steps closer. Hatra's decline came in the year 241, when the forces of the Sasanian king Shapur I broke through its defences. Historical accounts say the destruction was swift, the temples were looted, and the city was set ablaze. What remained was not only ruins, but also a sense of betrayal, as if the gods the city had honoured could not protect it. That violent fall became the root of much of the fear surrounding Hatra. Elders in nearby villages tell children that the gods cursed the city for turning too much toward pride, and that anyone who stays too long inside the walls risks carrying that curse home. During excavations in the 20th century, workers reported unease when entering the underground chambers beneath certain temples. These rooms, thought to be storage or ritual spaces, were dark and narrow, with air so heavy it was hard to breathe. One team described finding bones in sealed niches, though no full explanation was given about why they were there. Some believed they were animal sacrifices, others insisted they were human remains. After these discoveries, stories spread that anyone who disturbed the tomb-like spaces would be followed by shadows for the rest of their life. The fear of Hatra deepened in recent years, when the site became a target of destruction during conflict. In 2015, militants entered the ruins, toppling statues and damaging carvings with hammers. Yet even in that act, there were reports from locals who said some of the men who carried out the destruction soon fell sick, their families plagued with accidents and sudden deaths. Whether coincidence or something more, it added another layer to the belief that Hatra's temples hold a power that punishes those who defile them. Today, Hatra stands in silence, its towering stone arches casting long shadows over the desert floor. Tourists rarely come, not only because of the danger in the region, but also because of the site's reputation. Those who live near it often avoid passing too close, especially at night, saying that a chill rises from the ground as the sun sets. The city that once resisted empires now resists memory itself, forcing those who encounter it to wonder whether they are standing among ruins of stone or among something that has never truly left. The ruins of Ugarit, Syria. On Syria's Mediterranean coastline, near the present-day city of Latakia, stand the remains of Ugarit. At first glance, the broken walls and scattered stones look like many other ancient remains across the region. But Ugarit holds a history that is both celebrated and feared. This was once a thriving port city during the 2nd millennium BCE, a place where merchants carried copper, ivory, and timber from as far as Cyprus and Egypt. The city's power grew from trade, but it also became a center of spiritual life, where rituals were performed that later generations viewed with suspicion. Archaeologists first uncovered Ugarit in 1928 after a local farmer struck stone while ploughing his field near the village of Ras Shamra. Beneath the soil, they found entire palaces, temples, and archives of clay tablets written in cuneiform. Among these discoveries was the Ugaritic alphabet, one of the earliest known alphabetic scripts, dating to around 1400 BCE. For scholars, this was a remarkable achievement, a system of writing that influenced later Phoenician and eventually Greek scripts. Yet for many people living nearby, the unearthed texts carried a different weight. They contained hymns and incantations to Baal, Dagon, and Anat, deities associated with storms, fertility, and war, whose worship demanded offerings that villagers believed still echoed in the stones. The Temple of Baal dominated the city's skyline. Its towering columns and inner sanctuary were places where priests carried out sacrifices during violent storms, hoping to appease the god who controlled thunder and rain. The discovery of altars blackened by fire and the remains of animal bones left no doubt that these ceremonies were frequent and intense. Locals today speak of hearing low rumbles within the ruins during heavy weather, as if the god of storms has never fully abandoned his shrine. When thunder rolls across the coast, elders warn children not to walk near the ruins, fearing the sound is more than just the sky. Another site within Ugarit is the Temple of Dagon, a god linked to grain and the cycles of life and death. Clay tablets recovered from this temple describe rituals meant to ensure the fertility of crops, but they also tell of sacrifices made to stave off famine. Some texts speak of the sleep of Dagon, a phrase that villagers interpret as a reference to human offerings. Though archaeologists debate this, the idea has taken hold in local memory. Farmers in nearby villages still avoid planting during certain nights in spring, saying those were once the nights when the god demanded blood. Ugarit's royal palace stretched across more than 90 rooms, filled with archives, courtyards, and ceremonial halls. In these chambers, scribes recorded treaties with neighboring kingdoms and correspondence with Egypt's pharaohs, including letters to Akhenaten. But scattered among these diplomatic records were tablets that carried spells, protective charms, and curses. Some invoked the aid of underworld deities to punish enemies or to heal the sick. When these tablets were displayed in Damascus after their discovery, visitors reported feeling a deep unease, as if the words themselves carried power. Villagers still tell of guards who refused night duty around the ruins, claiming they heard whispers in the empty halls of the palace. What made Ugarit so unsettling was not only its worship of storm and death gods, but also the way the city met its end. Around 1200 BCE, during the widespread collapse of Bronze Age kingdoms, Ugarit was destroyed. Charred walls and shattered artifacts reveal a violent attack, likely linked to the Sea Peoples, who swept across the Mediterranean. Letters found in the ruins show the king of Ugarit pleading for aid, but no help came in time. The destruction was so sudden that entire archives of tablets were left to bake in the fires, perfectly preserved. For locals, the image of a city struck down in a single wave of violence has given the site a cursed reputation. They say the gods allowed Ugarit to be wiped out because of the rituals carried out in its temples. The air around the ruins still carries a sense of uneasiness. Travelers describe a heavy stillness that settles over the stones at dusk, when the sea winds carry a hollow sound through the collapsed halls. Residents of Ras Shamra say they avoid the area at night, insisting that strange lights flicker among the ruins and that the cries of animals echo long after the fields fall silent. To archaeologists, Ugarit remains a treasure of history and language. To those who live nearby, it is something else entirely, a city whose gods may be gone, but whose shadow has never lifted. The dark chambers of Chavin de Huantar, Peru. Beneath the high valleys of the Peruvian Andes lies Chavin de Huantar, a site whose underground passages and stone temples carry the memory of a civilization that lived more than 2,000 years ago. From the outside, its plazas and stairways suggest the grandeur of a ceremonial center, but it is the hidden chambers deep inside that have left visitors uneasy for centuries. These rooms were carved with such precision that sound carries in strange ways, turning whispers into echoes that seem to come from nowhere. As explorers and archaeologists began entering the tunnels in the 20th century, they noticed the unsettling atmosphere almost immediately. The labyrinth stretches in twisting paths that suddenly narrow or open into dark chambers, creating the sense of being trapped inside a place designed to confuse the senses. In these spaces, priests of the Chavin culture carried out rituals meant to connect the living with divine forces, and many of those rituals involve sound, shadow, and hallucinogenic plants. It is said that conch shell trumpets, known as pututus, were played in the passages, and the echoes would have shaken anyone caught inside the maze. At the heart of the complex stands the Lanzon, a granite monolith carved with the image of a supernatural being, half human and half jaguar. This stone idol, nearly 5 meters tall, is hidden in a chamber with narrow entrances that force a visitor to approach it in darkness. When torchlight flickered across its fanged mouth and wide eyes, the effect must have been overwhelming, as though the god itself was alive and watching. Researchers believe this setting was deliberate, intended to disorient and frighten those who came seeking guidance. Even today, the carvings appear alive when light moves across them, and many locals refuse to step inside, saying the Lanzon still has power. Other carvings on the walls show strange figures with claws, wings, and distorted faces, mixing animals and humans into forms that blur the line between nightmare and worship. These images are not decorative. They seem to have been placed to guide initiates deeper into the temple, or perhaps to warn them not to continue. In the smaller chambers, niches carved into the stone suggest that offerings were left here, and fragments of bones found nearby hint at ceremonies whose full meaning remains hidden. The narrowness of the corridors, combined with the sudden appearance of these carvings in torchlight, would have created an overwhelming sense of dread for anyone inside. When excavations uncovered the drainage system beneath the temple, another disturbing detail emerged. The underground canals were designed to carry rushing water through the site, producing a low roar that filled the passages. To anyone inside, it would have sounded as though the entire structure was alive, groaning and speaking through the stone. Coupled with the blasts of conch trumpets, the soundscape must have created a powerful illusion of voices from another world. Many archaeologists believe these effects were central to the rituals, designed to break down the senses of participants until they believed they were standing in the presence of gods. Even with modern equipment, entering the chambers has proven dangerous. The passages are tight and confusing, and more than once, researchers have admitted to losing their way in the dark. Local guides warn visitors not to linger, insisting that the site holds an energy that cannot be explained. Some even claim that people have left the tunnels shaken and sick, describing strange visions after being inside too long. Whether these stories come from superstition or from the site's unsettling design, the effect on those who enter is undeniable. Chavin de Huantar remains one of the most mysterious places in South America, not because of what is visible, but because of what is hidden in its depths. The combination of sound, shadow, and stone creates an environment that feels designed to pull people out of the ordinary world and into one shaped by fear and awe. For the Chavin culture, this may have been the very point, to make the boundary between humans and gods vanish within the dark chambers of the temple. For those who walk there today, that boundary still feels thin, as if the rituals never truly ended. The serpent pits of Chichen Itza, Mexico, under the blazing Yucatan sun, The ruins of Chichen Itza stand in grandeur, yet hidden among its temples and ball courts is something far more disturbing. The ancient Maya believed that deep sinkholes, called cenotes, were not simply geological formations, but sacred passageways into the underworld. Among them, the sacred cenote still draws attention, a wide, almost perfectly round pit filled with green water, its surface calm but hiding centuries of ritual and fear. Standing at its edge, one can almost feel the weight of what once occurred here, when the people of Chichen Itza looked to these waters not just as a source of life, but as a place to speak with the gods. The Spanish chroniclers who visited the site in the 16th century recorded chilling accounts of sacrifices performed at the sacred cenote. They described how men, women, and even children were thrown into the waters as offerings to Chak, the rain god, to ensure fertile harvests and protection from drought. Archaeological investigations in the early 20th century, particularly those led by Edward Thompson, confirmed these accounts when divers pulled up human bones, ceremonial objects, and finely crafted jewelry from the murky bottom. The evidence revealed that these were not isolated rituals, but practices carried out for generations, a grim reminder of how central the cenote was to Maya life and belief. The legend of the serpent adds another layer to the cenote's dark past. Local Maya people told stories of a great feathered serpent dwelling beneath the water, a form of Kukulkan, the god who was both feared and worshipped. It was said that when sacrifices were offered, the serpent would rise from the depths, unseen but felt, swallowing the offerings and carrying them into the realm of the gods. The fear was not only of drowning in the cenote's depths, but of vanishing into something far older and more terrifying. Even today, the elders in nearby villages warn children not to wander too close to the sacred cenote, saying that spirits linger near its edge and voices call from below. The serpent imagery is not confined to local legends alone, but carved into the very stones of Chichen Itza. At the base of El Castillo, the great pyramid dedicated to Kukulkan, stone serpents form the stairway balustrades, their heads enormous and fanged, looking out towards the sacred cenote. During the spring and autumn equinox, the setting sun casts a shadow that makes it appear as though a great serpent is slithering down the side of the pyramid, connecting heaven, earth, and the underworld. This eerie display was likely a deliberate design, meant to show the power of the god who demanded fear and devotion. To the people who lived here, the serpent was always close, watching and waiting. As archaeologists explored the cenote further, they uncovered not only remains of people, but also objects that spoke of desperation and reverence. Gold discs, jade ornaments, obsidian blades, and carved wooden idols had all been offered to the depths. Some bodies showed signs of violent wounds, while others may have drowned as part of the ritual itself. The diversity of objects suggested that offerings were made by both elites and common people, showing that no one was beyond the need to appease the forces believed to reside below. The cenote was not simply a grave, it was a bridge, and what was given there was meant to ensure survival above. The fear surrounding the sacred cenote did not fade even after Chichen Itza was abandoned. Stories continued to circulate among the descendants of the Maya, warning of cursed waters and restless souls. Travelers who visited the site in later centuries often remarked on the heavy silence around the cenote, a silence broken only by the cries of birds overhead. Some reported feeling sudden chills or seeing shadows move across the water's surface without explanation. For those who live nearby, these are not tales for tourists, but warnings passed down, reminders of the weight that still hangs over this place. At present, visitors peer into the cenote and see nothing but green water reflecting the sky, yet the fear remains close to the surface. The ruins of Chichen Itza may stand as a World Heritage Site, celebrated for their architecture and astronomical precision, but the serpent pits hold a different memory. The pit is not just an echo of history, but a reminder of how belief and fear can shape a people's world, turning water into a threshold where the living and the dead meet. To stand at its edge is to feel the thinness of that boundary, where legend and history blur. and where the shadow of the serpent still coils unseen below. The doomed palaces of Ani, Armenia. The ruined city of Ani lies silent on the high plateau of eastern Turkey, overlooking the Akurian River and facing the border of Armenia. Once called the city of 1,000 churches, Ani was more than a holy place. The city reached its height in the 10th and 11th centuries, when the Bagratid kings ruled Armenia from within its walls. Today the ruins are empty, and the once proud palaces stand broken, their stones marked by fire, earthquakes, and centuries of abandonment. The royal palaces of Ani once housed kings who shaped the fate of the region. The most famous was King Gagik I, who ordered the construction of grand halls decorated with arches, carved facades, and mosaics that spoke of both power and devotion. The largest palace complex, known as the Bagratid Palace, stood on a fortified cliff above the river. Yet what was meant to be strong soon became fragile, for the city's fortune was tied to the endless wars and rivalries of the medieval world. The Seljuk Turks invaded Ani in 1064, led by Sultan Alp Arslan. Contemporary accounts describe the destruction as brutal, with fire consuming homes and thousands killed. Earthquakes struck repeatedly, most notably in 1319, when much of the royal district collapsed in a single night. Survivors said the ground opened beneath the palaces, swallowing entire sections of the city and leaving walls leaning like broken teeth against the horizon. Memories passed down in the community added another layer to the ruins. For centuries, villagers who lived near Ani avoided the palaces after dark, saying they could hear the cries of those who perished during the city's sieges. Travellers in the 19th century, such as the Scottish explorer James Bryce, wrote that locals would guide him to the ruins only in daylight, refusing to linger once shadows stretched across the empty halls. With each generation, the legends became more unsettling. Shepherds who wandered too close at night spoke of torches flickering in the empty windows, as if the Bagratid kings still held counsel inside the ruined halls. These fears became so strong that villagers warned children not to enter the ruins, saying those who mocked the city's fall would be struck with illness or misfortune. Even in the modern era, these beliefs linger among Armenians who see Ani as both a sacred memory and a wound that never healed. In the 20th century, archaeologists studying Ani found more than just stones. Excavations revealed hidden chambers beneath the Bagratid Palace, where storage rooms and narrow passageways connected the royal complex to nearby fortifications. Researchers noted that the passages were unusually narrow and steep, suggesting they were meant for escape during sieges. Yet no records confirm if they were ever used, leaving unanswered questions about whether the royal family ever fled their doomed city through the earth itself. The sense of doom was not just born from battles or earthquakes. Ani's downfall was also tied to shifting trade. Once a vital stop on the Silk Road, the city lost its position when routes changed in the late medieval period. As caravans stopped passing through, the wealth dried up, and the palaces became harder to maintain. Stone by stone, roofs collapsed, floors cracked, and courtyards filled with weeds. By the time Ani was fully abandoned in the 17th century, the palaces were already unrecognizable, their grandeur erased by centuries of decline. What remains today are walls rising in silence against the barren plain, where the wind whistles through broken archways and cracked doorways. From afar, Ani looks like a ghost city, its palaces half buried in dust and grass. Standing in the ruins, one can still trace the outlines of grand staircases that led nowhere and halls that once echoed with music and prayer. For many Armenians, Ani represents both pride and sorrow, a place where kings once ruled, but where destruction came again and again, until the city itself seemed to reject life. The doomed palaces of Ani stand as symbols of both resilience and fragility, their survival against time shadowed by the memory of fear and ruin. Though empty, the city has never been forgotten, and the stories tied to its broken stones ensure that Ani remains one of the most haunting places in the ancient world. The standing stones of Carnac, France. The winds that sweep across the coast of Brittany pass over one of the most mysterious places in Europe, the standing stones of Carnac. Spread across fields and rolling hills, more than 3,000 stones rise from the earth in long, deliberate lines. They stand in silence, some taller than a person, others massive enough to weigh many tons, and they have stood here for over 6,000 years. The sight is overwhelming, not just for its scale, but for the unanswered questions it raises about the people who placed them and why. Walking among the stones, you notice how carefully they are arranged. The alignments stretch for miles, with each stone placed as though following a plan that has long been forgotten. Some are grouped into circles, while others form rows that seem to lead toward the horizon. Archaeologists have studied the layout for decades, but no single explanation has satisfied the mystery. Were they markers of the stars, used to track the sun and moon, or were they part of ancient rituals? The answers remain out of reach, yet the precision of the placement suggests that whoever built them possessed knowledge and purpose beyond what we often imagine of prehistoric life. Through local traditions, the story has taken on meanings beyond its surface. For generations, people in Brittany have been told that the stones were once soldiers, an army turned to stone by a curse. The story was whispered to children as a warning about the dangers of defying divine power. In some versions, Saint Cornelius, a bishop in the early Christian church, was said to have performed the miracle, freezing pagan warriors where they stood. These tales became so rooted in the culture that even now, villagers sometimes speak of the stones as if they were frozen men, still locked in ranks after thousands of years. Carnac unsettles not only because of its folklore, but also because the site seems to resist modern explanation. Excavations in the 19th and 20th centuries uncovered fragments of pottery and burial sites near the alignments, suggesting that the stones were connected to rituals of life and death. Yet every attempt to interpret the purpose of the site only deepens the mystery. Radiocarbon dating places the construction at around 3,300 BCE, far older than Stonehenge, and this raises questions about the society capable of building it. To move such heavy stones without wheels or metal tools would have required not just strength, but organization, leadership, and belief in something powerful enough to justify the effort. There are also disturbing accounts tied to the more recent stones. Farmers once avoided ploughing too close, believing the stones cursed their fields. Travelers in the 18th century wrote about villagers who refused to walk between certain rows after nightfall, convinced that spirits moved among the stones in the dark. Even in the 20th century, stories persisted of animals behaving strangely near Carnac, refusing to approach particular formations. These local fears have faded somewhat with tourism, but older residents still speak with unease about nights when the wind carries strange sounds across the fields. Among Carnac's features, the most striking is the great stone called the Géant du Magneau. Standing over 20 feet tall, it towers above the others like a sentinel. Local legend says that if you walk around it 3 times at midnight, you will be granted visions of the future. The stone is scarred and weathered, yet its presence dominates the landscape. To many, it feels less like a relic of the past and more like a living being watching silently over the land. Using modern tools such as ground-penetrating radar and satellite imaging, archaeologists continue to study the alignments. Some theories suggest the stones may have tracked lunar cycles, helping farmers predict tides and seasons in a region where the ocean ruled daily life. Others believe the rows marked ceremonial pathways, guiding processions that honored ancestors or gods. Still, no matter how advanced the research becomes, none of these explanations feels complete, and the aura of Carnac endures. The stones of Carnac are not crumbling ruins or hidden caves. They are out in the open, exposed to sky and weather, yet they defy the passage of time. Their mystery is not one of absence, but of overwhelming presence. Each stone feels deliberate, as though it has something to say, but the message is locked away. Locals still pause when they pass by. Tourists speak in hushed voices, and the fields themselves seem charged with something more than history. Whether they were monuments, temples, or messages carved in stone, Karnak remains one of the most haunting places in Europe, a vast puzzle that refuses to give up its secrets. The ghostly towers of Great Zimbabwe, like the bones of something ancient and immense, the ruins of Great Zimbabwe climb from the hills, their stone walls mute yet charged with memory. This was once the heart of a vast kingdom that thrived between the 11th and 15th centuries, a city of wealth, trade, and power that drew merchants from as far as the Swahili coast and Arabia. But to those who live nearby today, these ruins are not only an echo of history, they are a place of unease, surrounded by stories of curses, restless spirits, and an empire that collapsed in mystery. Towering more than 10 meters high, the great enclosure stretches for hundreds of meters in a near-perfect curve, making it the most striking structure of all. Within it stands the conical tower, a massive, solid stone structure with no doorway, windows, or chambers. Locals whisper that the tower is not empty at all, but filled with the spirits of ancient rulers, their presence bound into the stone itself. Even today, many who pass by avoid looking directly at it, fearing that to do so too long invites misfortune. The rulers of Great Zimbabwe were said, in legend, to have drawn on hidden powers to build their fortune and control trade across southern Africa. But with power came suspicion, and stories of rulers who used rituals to command obedience. Oral traditions tell of ceremonies held in the shadow of the towers, where offerings were made to ancestral spirits. The echoes of these ceremonies are said to linger, heard by those who camp too close to the walls, where the sound of drums has been reported on nights when no one is near. The site's abandonment remains a puzzle. By the late 15th century, the city was left behind, its stonework overtaken by grass and silence. Some believe climate change and exhausted soil drove the people away, while others point to internal conflict and the rise of rival powers. But local folklore tells a darker tale, one of angered spirits and forbidden knowledge. According to some elders, the rulers misused the power granted by their ancestors, causing the land itself to reject them. For centuries, the ruins were avoided by those living nearby. Many believed that to enter the towers was to invite sickness or death, and that anyone who removed a stone would bring a curse upon themselves and their family. Colonial explorers in the 19th century recorded these fears, noting how guides would often refuse to go too far inside. Even today, some locals will not set foot within the walls, preferring to honor the ruins from a distance. The colonial period brought its own layer of myth. Early European explorers, unwilling to believe that Africans could have built such a city, spread wild theories about its origin, linking it to the Queen of Sheba or lost tribes of Israel. What remains undisputed is the skill of the builders, whose techniques have resisted both time and weather. The precision of the stonework continues to baffle those who study it, a silent testimony to an empire whose secrets were never fully passed down. Recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Great Zimbabwe now draws both researchers and travelers who come to study its past and marvel at its towering walls. Yet despite the studies and excavations, the site still carries a feeling that history alone cannot explain. Guides speak softly as they lead visitors through the great enclosure, careful not to linger too long by the conical tower. Some visitors report dreams filled with strange voices after spending time within the ruins, while others describe a heaviness in the air, as if the stones themselves remember what happened here. To stand among the ghostly towers is to feel caught between two worlds, the known history of a great civilization and the enduring fear that something hidden still lingers in the stone. The walls may be silent, but they carry the weight of centuries, and those who live nearby still treat the ruins with caution. Great Zimbabwe is more than a relic of the past. It is a place where legend and memory are fused into stone, where the fall of an empire still whispers through the air, and where the watchful presence of the dead seems never far away. The shadowed stepwells of Gujarat, India. In western India, where the plains bake under the sun for months at a time, stairways wind downward into the depths of the earth. These are the stepwells of Gujarat, ancient water reservoirs built not only for survival, but also for devotion, commerce, and gathering. Their walls of carved stone lead downward in tiered symmetry, turning the simple act of drawing water into a journey into shadow. Yet with their beauty comes a darker side, for many locals believe that spirits linger in the depths, making the wells places of fear as much as necessity. The step wells were constructed between the 7th and 19th centuries, with some of the most famous examples like Rani Ki Vav in Patan and Adalajni Vav near Ahmedabad. Rani Ki Vav, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, was built around the 11th century in memory of King Bhimdev I by his widowed queen, Udayamati. Its corridors stretch downward more than 7 levels, decorated with over 1,000 intricate sculptures of gods, guardians, and mythical beings. What strikes many who enter is not only the artistry, but the feeling that each step takes them further into a realm meant to test the spirit as much as the body. The architecture of these wells reveals an extraordinary mix of function and belief. Water was sacred in a land often plagued by drought, and so the stepwells became shrines as much as sources of life. Yet with water lying in darkness at the bottom of narrow passageways, they also became natural settings for stories of ghosts and restless souls. Locals whisper that wandering too deep alone risks an encounter with figures who never found their way back to the surface. Some claim to hear the echo of footsteps following them, even when the stairs are empty. Of all the tales tied to India's stepwells, one of the most unsettling belongs to Adalaj, built in the late 15th century. History records that it was commissioned by Queen Rudabai after her husband was killed by an invading ruler. The conqueror, Mahmud Begada, agreed to finish the stepwell, but when it was completed, the queen is said to have taken her own life within its walls, rather than live under his rule. Visitors sometimes report seeing the faint outline of a woman near the upper galleries, her form disappearing if approached too closely. Others speak of sudden chills despite the heavy heat above ground, as though grief itself clings to the stone. Carvings of deities, intended to safeguard the water, also contribute to the stepwell's eerie atmosphere. Faces of gods and demons emerge from the shadows as the light shifts, and their silent gazes seem to follow those who descend. At Rani Ki Vav, some statues remain so well preserved that even the delicate jewelry etched into the stone can still be seen. This remarkable preservation makes the silence below feel even heavier, as though the guardians are waiting for those who pass. Despite being feats of engineering, the wells also carried dangers. Their depth meant that accidents were common, and those who slipped could easily vanish without help. Oral traditions in Gujarat speak of children who wandered too far down and were never seen again, leading to warnings still told by elders today. Some villagers avoid certain stepwells at night altogether, saying that if one leans too far into the darkness, unseen hands might drag them in. While scholars view the wells as vital evidence of India's past, the fears of local people continue to endure. In smaller villages, some stepwells are left abandoned, overgrown with weeds, and avoided despite their historical value. The balance between reverence and dread is what gives these sites their haunting power. People recognize the wells as symbols of survival and devotion, yet they also acknowledge them as spaces where the line between the living and the lost feels unusually thin. The shadowed stepwells of Gujarat stand today as reminders of how human ingenuity can shape the land, but they also carry echoes that time has not erased. To walk down their steps is to move from light into darkness, past carvings that tell both stories of gods and whispers of sorrow. For those who live near them, they are not just monuments of stone, but places where beauty and unease exist together, layered into the earth itself. The Devil's Mountain of Tiahuanaco, Bolivia. Not far from Lake Titicaca, on the elevated Altiplano of Bolivia, rises a rocky peak known locally as the Devil's Mountain. To outsiders, it is an unassuming peak, but for generations, the surrounding Aymara people have regarded it with deep unease. Its slopes are littered with stone ruins and scattered monoliths, remnants of the ancient city of Tiahuanaco, which flourished between 400 and 1000 CE. While archaeologists study its walls, terraces, and gateways as evidence of a sophisticated pre-Incan civilization, the locals speak in whispers about the spirits that still inhabit the mountain, guarding secrets that were never meant to be disturbed. The mountain itself is a natural fortress, its jagged cliffs rising sharply against the sky. Along its ridges are remains of terraces and ceremonial platforms, stones placed with such precision that modern engineers struggle to understand how ancient builders accomplished it. The locals believe these terraces were more than practical. They were sacred spaces where the Tiahuanaco priests communicated with powers beyond the living. Many say that the energy of these rituals remains, lingering in the shadows between the rocks. Within the ruins stands the Acapana Pyramid, a massive step structure believed to have been a ceremonial center for water and fertility rituals. Excavations by Arthur Poznański in the early 20th century revealed its underground channels and stone basins designed to collect and distribute rainwater. They claim that the mountain itself is a living entity, and the stones of the Ana hum with the memory of offerings made centuries ago. Travelers who venture too close often speak of sudden chills or disorientation, even when the weather is calm. The Gateway of the Sun is another feature that adds to the mountain's fearsome reputation. Carved from a single block of stone, it depicts deities and symbols that scholars associate with Tiahuanaco cosmology. Some figures hold staff and wear masks, their expressions frozen in a gaze that locals interpret as watching, judging, and punishing. There are stories of people who entered the ruins at night and claimed to hear whispers coming from the gateway, warning them to leave before dark. Natural dangers are woven into the mountain's enduring legend. Its steep slopes are prone to sudden drops and loose stones, and many travelers have disappeared over the centuries. Villagers say that those who vanish are taken by the spirits of the mountain, victims of its old magic. For the locals, these dangers are not just physical. They are proof that the mountain is alive in ways humans cannot fully control. Archaeological evidence shows that Tiahuanaco was connected to distant regions through trade, culture, and belief. Objects of gold, pottery, and carved stone traveled from the Amazon, the Andes, and even the coast, suggesting that the city influenced a vast area. Yet the power of the mountain, as remembered by the locals, surpasses these worldly achievements. They tell of shamans who could call down storms or spirits from the peak, of ceremonies conducted under the light of the full moon, and of punishments delivered to those who broke sacred laws. These tales have persisted even after centuries of colonial and modern influence, forming a continuous layer of fear and respect. After centuries of examination, the mountain's secrets remain firmly hidden. Modern visitors often explore the terraces, pyramids, and gateways, marveling at the engineering, but they cannot ignore the strange sensations reported by many. The wind seems to carry voices from the past, and shadows fall in ways that confuse the mind. Locals avoid lingering after sunset, believing that the mountain's spirits walk among the stones, restless and watchful. Archaeologists may map the structures and study the artifacts, but the mountain itself remains untamed, a place where history and legend meet, and where the boundary between the living and the dead feels fragile. To approach Devil's Mountain is to enter a world shaped by both human hands and ancient fear. The stones are more than ruins. They are witnesses to ceremonies, power, and devotion, yet also reminders of the dangers that come with pride and curiosity. For the people of Tiahuanaco and the surrounding villages, the mountain is a living memory, a place where the past is never truly silent, and where the spirits of long-gone priests and rulers seem to linger among the terraces, always watching. The cursed necropolis of Hierapolis, Turkey. Dating back to the 12th century BCE, the necropolis of Hierapolis sprawls beneath the city's famous terraces, filled with tombs and mausoleums that carry an air of unease. Stretching for more than 2 kilometers, it contains thousands of sarcophagi, tombs, and mausoleums dating from the 12th century BCE through the Byzantine era. To travelers, the ruins are fascinating. To locals, they are a place of caution and respect. The dead are said to linger here, guarding their graves, while whispers of the past seem to echo among the stones. Hierapolis was founded by the Attalid kings of Pergamon around 190 BCE and later became a thriving Roman city. The necropolis grew alongside it, housing the wealthy, priests, and officials in elaborately carved tombs. Some are adorned with reliefs depicting funerary rituals, gods, and symbolic animals meant to protect the dead in the afterlife. Archaeologists have uncovered tombs with multiple chambers and intricate inscriptions, yet local stories suggest that disturbing these graves invites misfortune. Villagers still warn that those who walk too close at night may feel sudden cold or hear footsteps echoing when no one treads. The Plutonium, a small cave at the base of the necropolis, adds to the fear surrounding Hierapolis. Ancient sources describe it as a sanctuary of Pluto, the god of the underworld, and visitors today report strange phenomena there. Roman priests once performed rituals at this cave, using the naturally occurring toxic gases to symbolize death and divine power. Even in modern times, the faint odor of sulfur can rise unexpectedly, and some claim that animals refuse to enter the area. Locals maintain that the spirits of priests and the dead remain bound to the cave, protecting the secrets of the necropolis. Among the tombs, the martyrium of Philip the Apostle is particularly striking, marking what is believed to be the final resting place of an early Christian leader. Built in the 4th century CE, it stands on the edge of the city, partially collapsed yet imposing. Archaeologists have documented the mausoleum's large circular structure and surrounding sarcophagi, but villagers often speak of unnatural occurrences near the site. Some say shadows move against the walls, while others recall hearing low chants or cries during quiet nights. These stories have persisted for centuries, blending history with cautionary tales of the afterlife. Beyond solitary graves, the necropolis of Hierapolis spreads into vast communal burial areas. Families would bury several generations together, stacking sarcophagi within monumental enclosures. Some of the inscriptions warn intruders against desecrating the graves, invoking curses that promise sickness or death to those who disrespected the dead. Even today, farmers and shepherds in the surrounding villages avoid certain areas of the necropolis after sunset. They speak of sudden drops in temperature and an overwhelming sense of being watched, experiences that outsiders often dismiss, but locals treat with grave seriousness. Hundreds of graves, filled with coins, jewelry, and funerary goods, were revealed in 20th century digs, providing fragments of Hierapolis's human story. Despite these discoveries, some areas remain unexplored, and the untouched tombs are considered especially dangerous. Villagers say that tombs that have not been opened for centuries are inhabited by the spirits of the restless dead. Travelers report feeling dizzy or uneasy while walking among these undisturbed graves, as if unseen eyes follow their every move. The combination of history and lingering fear gives the necropolis an unusual presence. The white travertine cliffs above, often bright and sunlit, contrast sharply with the shadowed rows of tombs below, emphasizing the sense of descent into another world. The necropolis seems alive in ways that defy logic. Unexplained noises, shifting shadows, and the persistent sense of being observed make it impossible to walk among the graves without tension. Residents of Hierapolis view the necropolis as a site of solemn veneration and looming threat. It is treated with respect, visited in daylight for prayers or offerings, but avoided after dark. Even as historians and archaeologists study the tombs, the local stories continue to warn that some mysteries are better left undisturbed. The stones themselves seem to hold the weight of centuries, whispering of lives ended long ago and a presence that endures beyond death. The abandoned temples of Angkor, Cambodia. Amid the dense northern Cambodian forests, Angkor's ruins stand in silence, stone towers jutting through the trees like the outstretched fingers of forgotten gods. Built between the 9th and 15th centuries by the Khmer Empire, these temples once served as centers of worship, governance, and art. The largest and most famous, Angkor Wat, draws thousands of visitors each year, yet beyond the main complexes lie countless smaller temples, abandoned and swallowed by trees, vines, and shadow. Locals often speak of these places with a mix of reverence and fear, warning travelers not to linger after dark, as the spirits of monks and ancient rulers are said to remain among the stones. Many of the temples were dedicated to Hindu deities before being converted to Buddhist sites in later centuries. The intricate carvings on their walls depict gods, demons, and celestial beings, and the attention to detail is staggering. Faces of Avalokiteshvara and Vishnu stare silently across courtyards, their expressions calm yet unsettling. Villagers claim that at dusk, the shadows of these carvings shift as though moving, and some have reported hearing faint chanting carried on the wind through the broken corridors. Tar Prom, one of the most overgrown and eerie temples, is often called the Jungle Temple because massive roots of silk, cotton, and strangler fig trees have grown around and through its walls. Built in the late 12th century by King Jayavarman VII, it was intended as a monastery and university. Archaeologists have worked carefully to preserve its structures, but the locals have long told stories of monks who disappeared in the shadows of the ruins, never to be seen again. The forest seems alive here, and travellers often describe a sensation of being watched, a feeling that grows heavier as the sun sets and the dense canopy blocks the light. Bante Gde, another abandoned monastery, has a reputation for strange phenomena. Its halls, once filled with prayer, now echo only with the wind through collapsed roofs and fallen stones. Villagers say that footsteps are sometimes heard along the narrow corridors at night, although no one is present. Some claim to have glimpsed figures in saffron robes, vanishing into the walls or behind trees, while others report sudden drops in temperature or an unexplained heaviness that presses down on the chest when walking alone. The Khmer Empire itself was a civilization of immense wealth, art, and religious devotion, yet many of its temples fell into disuse after the 15th century. Political turmoil, shifting capitals, and the encroaching jungle contributed to their abandonment, but locals attribute more mysterious causes. Stories persist of rulers who angered the gods and priests who defied their warnings, resulting in curses that lingered in the stones. Families who have lived in the surrounding villages for generations speak of these curses with caution, often offering prayers or leaving small offerings when passing through the ruins. Stone reliefs, carvings, and statues were uncovered during 20th century restoration and excavation, revealing the Khmer builders' remarkable skill and devotion. Yet some areas remain untouched, deliberately avoided by both scholars and locals. Villagers say that certain temples are home to restless spirits, and anyone who disturbs the stones without permission risks sickness, accidents, or visions that can haunt the mind. Even during the day, the abandoned temples carry a strange weight, a silence that feels thicker than the surrounding forest, as if centuries of memory cling to every stone. The physical risks of unstable walls and rough ground are compounded by the temple's spiritual reputation, keeping many from venturing far. Travelers have described hearing whispers that seem to respond to their thoughts, or seeing flickers of light in the deep halls where the sun cannot reach. Some speak of animals avoiding specific areas, refusing to enter courtyards that were once filled with human activity. These tales are part of the local culture, passed down from elders who remember earlier generations warning children about the unseen guardians of the temples. Around Angkor, the ruins are not just ancient structures, they serve as tangible memories of history for those who live nearby. They honor the spirits of monks, kings, and workers, leaving offerings of incense, flowers, and rice. Yet they do so with care, aware that the ruins are not completely tamed. The temple's silent towers, dark corridors, and deep shadows continue to inspire awe and caution, a place where the line between the living and the long dead seems thin, and where history is not only seen in stone, but felt in every step taken among the abandoned halls. The bloodstains of Teotihuacan, Mexico. At the edge of the Valley of Mexico, the ancient city of Teotihuacan spreads across the plains, its massive pyramids and long avenues silent witnesses to a civilization that flourished centuries before the Aztecs. The Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon dominate the skyline, but it is the Avenue of the Dead and the surrounding temples that hold stories of rituals so intense that locals still speak of them in hushed tones. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of human sacrifice, and villagers nearby say that the echoes of those ceremonies linger, giving some parts of the city a feeling of unease. Teotihuacan was built between 100 BCE and 550 CE and was one of the largest cities in the ancient world, home to perhaps 100 people at its peak. Its residents built vast apartment complexes, marketplaces, and ceremonial centers with remarkable precision. The murals and carvings found on the walls depict gods, warriors, and priests performing ceremonies, some of which involve blood offerings. Local legend tells that the spirits of those sacrificed remain restless, especially near the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, known for its ritual chambers. Visitors often describe a heaviness in the air, a sense of being watched as they walk along the ancient stones. The practice of human sacrifice at Teotihuacan appears to have been linked to fertility, warfare, and the favor of the gods. Archaeological studies have found decapitated skeletons and individuals buried with offerings beneath temples, suggesting these acts were meant to sanctify the buildings and ensure prosperity. Villagers today recount stories passed down through generations, describing how priests would climb the pyramids carrying victims, their chants echoing across the city. Even without witnessing these rituals, the air in some of the older temples is said to carry an inexplicable tension, as if the ground itself remembers the ceremonies. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent, or Quetzalcoatl Temple, is the most infamous site. Built in the 3rd century CE, it is decorated with carved heads of deities, some showing expressions of anger or sorrow. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of dozens of sacrificed individuals buried in layers beneath the temple, many of them warriors or young women. Local residents warn that the shadows cast by the temple at sunset seem to move unnaturally, and some have reported hearing cries or whispers echoing from the underground chambers. These stories have persisted for centuries, feeding a sense of dread that keeps many from exploring alone after dark. The Avenue of the Dead, which stretches for over 2 kilometers, was the main thoroughfare connecting the pyramids and smaller temples. Alongside it, plazas and altars once hosted large ceremonies involving music, dance, and offerings to the gods. Villagers claim that on certain nights, when the wind sweeps through the avenue, it carries sounds resembling drums or chants, though no one is present. Archaeologists acknowledge that wind and echo could explain some of these sounds, yet locals insist that there is something more, a presence linked to the blood spilled on these stones centuries ago. By the 6th century CE, Teotihuacan had declined, though the reasons behind its fall remain uncertain. Drought, internal conflict, and social upheaval likely contributed, but the locals have always added a darker layer to the story. They speak of a city cursed by the blood of its own people, a place where the gods demanded such high prices that the living could never fully appease them. Even today, when festivals are held in the area, certain ruins are avoided and prayers are offered to those who died so long ago. Murals, obsidian artifacts, and offerings found alongside human remains during 20th century excavations revealed the vast scope of rituals at Teotihuacan. Yet much of the city remains unexplored, particularly underground chambers that may have held more sacrifices or hidden sanctuaries. Villagers continue to treat these areas with caution, claiming that anyone who disturbs the earth risks illness or misfortune. Some say the blood spilled in these ancient ceremonies left a mark not just on the stones, but on the air itself, a weight that remains even as centuries pass. Exploring the ruins of Teotihuacan now allows one to sense a city that once thrived on worship, influence, and fear. The pyramids and temples are extraordinary feats of engineering, yet they are also monuments to lives taken in devotion and terror. For those who live nearby, the city is more than history. It is a place where memory, legend, and the echoes of blood intertwine, a space where the past feels as immediate and unsettling as the shadows that stretch across the ancient stone. The restless dead of Tara Hill, Ireland. From a distance, Tara Hill in County Wexford rises quietly, its slopes marked by ancient stones and burial mounds that hint at a past both sacred and unsettling. The hill is dotted with stone circles, burial mounds, and remnants of early Celtic fortifications, showing its significance as a sacred site for millennia. Archaeologists have identified some mounds as dating back to the Bronze Age, around 2000 BCE, while others appear to have been reused by later communities. Locals, however, speak of the hill with caution, believing that the spirits of the dead still wander among the stones, restless and watchful. The hill is named after the Celtic goddess Tara, and legends suggest it was a meeting place for druids and chieftains. Rituals, offerings, and burials were performed here for generations, creating layers of human presence that some say still resonate in the air. Villagers claim that on foggy mornings, shadows move unnaturally among the mounds, and strange figures appear briefly before vanishing. These stories have persisted for centuries, with parents warning children not to stray too far when climbing the hill, especially after sunset. Tara Hill's burial mounds are particularly striking. One of the largest, known locally as the Great Mound, is surrounded by smaller cairns and standing stone. Excavations in the 19th and early 20th centuries uncovered human remains, pottery, and bronze tools, confirming its use as a significant ceremonial site. Despite these discoveries, the hill retains an air of tension. Visitors have reported hearing whispers that seem to come from nowhere, and some describe sudden chills that sweep over them even on warm days. Locals insist that these are the voices of those buried centuries ago, restless spirits warning against intrusion. The restless dead of the hill are the subject of several enduring legends. One tale speaks of a warrior buried with his sword, cursed to protect his territory in death. Villagers recount that travelers sometimes glimpse a lone figure near the Great Mound, moving silently as though patrolling the slopes. Another story involves a group of druids said to have performed a final ritual to preserve the land, only for their spirits to remain bound to the hill. People claim that strange lights and low chants occasionally emerge from the mounds during certain nights of the year, especially near Samhain, when the boundary between the living and the dead is thought to be thin. The surrounding landscape adds to the eerie atmosphere. Dense woods near the base of the hill can create sudden darkness, and the wind carries sound in unusual ways, amplifying whispers and the creaking of branches. Locals often describe hearing the echo of footsteps behind them while no one is present, or seeing figures in ancient garb disappearing among the trees. These experiences reinforce the belief that Tara Hill is more than a historical site. It is a place where the past remains very much alive, though in ways that are unsettling. Much of the hill remains untouched, even as archaeologists concentrate on mapping the mounds and retrieving artifacts. Some burial sites are deliberately avoided, both out of respect and fear. Villagers maintain that disturbing the graves risks angering the spirits, bringing illness or misfortune. Even on sunny days, hikers report an oppressive heaviness on certain paths, a sensation that cannot be explained by weather or terrain. Many believe this is the weight of centuries of ritual, death, and unresolved energy concentrated in the stones. The reputation for haunting is deeply connected to the hill's historical significance. It was once a strategic location used for lookout points and fortifications, and later, during the medieval period, it was connected to local clans and chieftains. Each generation left its mark, layering the hill with both human achievement and lingering spirits. Villagers speak of mounds that should not be touched, and stone circles where one might see fleeting figures at twilight. They insist that these are not mere stories, but warnings handed down through time, a reminder that the dead of Tara Hill are not at rest. Climbing Tara Hill today is a journey through history and legend. The mounds, cairns, and standing stones are impressive as archaeological sites, yet they carry more than evidence of past lives. The local warnings, eerie shadows, and unexplained sounds create an experience that is both fascinating and unnerving. For those who live nearby, the hill is sacred and dangerous, a place where the dead continue to watch over the land and the living move with caution, aware that some spirits refuse to sleep. The forbidden shrines of Okinawa, Japan. Surrounded by Okinawa's forests and hills, shrines remain mostly untouched, as locals regard them as haunted or forbidden. Many of these sacred sites date back centuries, linked to the Ryukyu kingdom, which flourished from the 15th to the 19th century. The shrines, often dedicated to ancestors, deities, or local spirits, are small and unassuming, yet they carry an air of unease that villagers cannot ignore. Paths leading to them are overgrown, and visitors sometimes find the forest unusually quiet, as if holding its breath. The Noro, priestesses serving as bridges between the living and spirits, are venerated at one of the most feared shrines. In the Ryukyu kingdom, Noro were powerful figures, performing rituals to ensure harvests, protect villages, and maintain balance with the spirits. Locals recount that spirits linked to these priestesses still linger at certain shrines, particularly those abandoned after the fall of the kingdom in the late 19th century. People say that if you step too close without offering respect, you may feel a sudden chill or hear whispers in the trees around you. Several shrines are hidden deep in the mountains, accessible only by narrow trails. Some are marked by stone torii gates, moss-covered statues, or carved stones shaped like guardian lions called shisa. Archaeological studies confirm that many of these sites were built in the 15th and 16th centuries, and some have inscriptions indicating rituals performed for protection against disease or misfortune. Villagers maintain that these inscriptions are more than historical records, they are warnings. Locals tell of travelers who ignored them only to encounter illness, accidents, or visions of shadowy figures that seem to follow them home. The nature of Okinawan spirituality combines Shinto practices with indigenous Ryukyuan beliefs, emphasizing respect for the dead and the unseen. At the forbidden shrines, offerings of rice, sake, or flowers are still left by those brave enough to approach. However, few dare to linger. Stories abound of people who entered the shrines alone at night and were struck by dizziness, nausea, or a sudden sense of being watched. Some have claimed to see faint figures, dressed in traditional robes, moving silently among the trees, vanishing when approached. One shrine near the village of Nakijin is particularly notorious. It is said to have been the site of a ritual in the 16th century intended to seal a vengeful spirit. Locals warn that the spirit remains restless, and travelers report hearing the sound of running water or chanting when no streams or humans are nearby. Archaeologists have found fragments of ceremonial objects and small offerings buried beneath the stone floors, confirming that rituals were once conducted there, though the precise methods and purposes remain unknown. Family lineages are honored at other shrines, where ancestors were traditionally worshipped. Villagers explain that disrespecting these shrines, even inadvertently, can lead to bad luck, illness, or misfortune for the household. Children are taught from a young age to bow or offer a prayer if passing by, and elders recalled tales of outsiders who ignored these customs and later suffered unexplained accidents. These stories, passed through generations, have helped maintain a sense of reverence and fear around the shrines. Time has passed, but the shrines still stand, even as the surrounding forest gradually reclaims them. The combination of natural isolation, historical significance, and local warnings gives them a chilling presence. Some visitors describe an oppressive weight in the air, a quiet that feels too still, and shadows that seem to flicker without cause. Small amulets and talismans discovered in crevices suggest that past worshippers sought to appease the spirits or guard themselves. Local elders also say that certain shrines have stones that appear to shift overnight, as if moved by unseen hands. Even during daylight, the shrines evoke unease, as if the spirits of past rituals continue to observe those who approach. These forbidden shrines mean more to the people of Okinawa than simple relics of history. They are sacred, dangerous, and alive with memory. Respect is demanded, both out of tradition and fear, and those who fail to honor that boundary risk the lingering presence of spirits that refuse to rest. The stones, torii gates, and moss-covered statues are silent witnesses to centuries of devotion and caution, standing in quiet defiance of those who would trespass without reverence. The haunted fortress of Masada, Israel. Overlooking the Dead Sea from a rugged plateau, Masada looms like a silent stone sentinel under the desert sky. Its walls, once the stronghold of King Herod the Great, now stand in silent testimony to centuries of history, conquest, and tragedy. Built between 37 and 31 BCE, the fortress served as both a royal palace and a military stronghold, with storerooms, bathhouses, and elaborate water systems carved into the rock. Despite its architectural brilliance, the site carries a heavy reputation among locals, who speak cautiously of spirits said to linger in the ancient halls and desert winds. Masada became a symbol of desperate resistance during the First Jewish-Roman War. In 73 CE, a group of Jewish rebels, known as the Sicarii, held out against a Roman legion that laid siege to the fortress. Historical accounts, including those of the historian Josephus, tell that when defeat became inevitable, the defenders chose to take their own lives rather than surrender. This tragic act left an indelible mark on the fortress, and local stories suggest that the sorrow of those deaths still echoes through the stones. Some villagers claim that on quiet nights, faint cries or the sound of footsteps can be heard along the ancient walls, even when no one is present. The northern palace, Herod's grand construction, contains terraces and rooms that offer commanding views of the desert below. Within these walls, carved cisterns stored water for months of isolation, and intricate mosaics once decorated the floors. Archaeologists have documented evidence of fire and destruction in several areas, supporting accounts of violent struggle. Yet visitors often report sensations of unease, as if the shadows in the long corridors are thicker than the desert night, and the very air carries the weight of fear and despair from 2,000 years ago. Near the western ramp, the Roman siege works remain partially preserved. The ramp, built to scale the cliff, allowed the legion to breach the fortress, yet local legends describe phantom soldiers still marching along the paths. Witnesses have recounted seeing figures in ancient armor, disappearing into thin air, or feeling sudden chills while walking the same routes. Some even describe whispers of strategy or commands carried on the wind, as if the fortress itself remembers the final moments of resistance and relives them endlessly. Inside the fortress, the remains of storerooms and barracks suggest that daily life continued under constant tension. Broken pottery, coins, and tools give glimpses of ordinary existence in extraordinary circumstances. Local guides occasionally share tales of objects moving slightly, doors closing on their own, or glimpses of shadowy figures among the ruins. These experiences, combined with the harsh landscape and history of sacrifice, create a lingering aura of the supernatural, and locals maintain a respectful distance when night falls. The synagogue at Masada, one of the oldest ever found in Israel, is another site said to carry spiritual weight. Built in the honest century CE, it features stone benches and a central platform for reading scriptures. Visitors report that the area feels especially still, with a silence that is almost suffocating, broken only by the faint sound of wind through the stones. Elders in nearby communities warn that the spirits of those who prayed and died within these walls remain vigilant and wary of outsiders. Even the water cisterns, which once sustained life in the fortress during sieges, are linked to local stories of hauntings. Some claim to have heard water dripping in perfect rhythm, echoing through tunnels, even when the cisterns are empty. Others describe sensations of being watched while descending to explore these spaces, accompanied by an inexplicable heaviness in the chest. Scholars and tourists may attribute these feelings to the desert environment or echoes, but villagers insist that Masada carries more than historical memory. It retains the sorrow and courage of those who faced inevitable death. Climbing the fortress today is both a historical journey and a walk through lingering legend. The terraces and walls demonstrate engineering skill and foresight, yet each step is shadowed by stories of sacrifice and restless spirits. For the people living nearby, Masada is not simply a ruin or tourist destination. It is a place where courage and tragedy are preserved in stone, where the whispers of the past remain, and where the line between history and the supernatural seems perilously thin. The dark tunnels of Derinkuyu, Turkey. Concealed beneath Cappadocia's scorched plains, a sprawling underground city waits to be discovered. Derinkuyu, carved from soft volcanic rock, descends multiple levels into the earth, its tunnels twisting and turning in ways that disorient even seasoned explorers. Archaeologists believe the site was first expanded during the Byzantine era, around the 5th to 10th centuries, as local populations sought refuge from invading armies. While it served a practical purpose, the underground city has long been linked to eerie stories, and villagers in the surrounding towns speak of strange sounds and shadows within its depths. Complete with living quarters, kitchens, wine presses, and chapels, Derinkuyu's tunnels were intended to house thousands of inhabitants. Stone doors could seal entire sections in case of attack, while hidden ventilation shafts ensured the air remained breathable. Despite these measures, locals warn that wandering too far into the passages can be dangerous. People report feeling sudden cold drafts, unexplained touches on their shoulders, or hearing whispers echoing from passageways that have been empty for centuries. Many of the tunnels lead to deep chambers that were used as communal spaces or storage areas. Archaeological excavations have uncovered pottery, lamps, and carved niches, indicating the tunnels were once alive with human activity. Villagers claim that at night, faint footsteps echo through the passages, even though no one is present. Some describe hearing chants, or singing that cannot be traced, as if the inhabitants of centuries past are still moving through the tunnels, performing forgotten rituals or prayers. One particularly extensive section of Derinkuyu descends to nearly 60 meters below the surface. Here, narrow stairways and low ceilings create a sense of claustrophobia, and light barely penetrates the stone. Tour guides sometimes warn visitors to remain close, but locals tell tales of people becoming disoriented and feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon them. Some recount seeing shadowy figures at the edges of their vision or experiencing sudden dizziness that lifts once they return to the surface. The underground city was also equipped with wells and water storage, which allowed communities to survive extended sieges. Yet even these life-sustaining spaces are said to carry a presence. Archaeologists have uncovered hidden chambers near the cisterns, some sealed for centuries, hinting at secret spaces meant to hide people or treasures. Locals claim that in these areas the air feels heavier and their voices echo strangely, as if the walls themselves are listening. Villagers report that water stored in these ancient cisterns seems to ripple without cause, and the sound of dripping sometimes resembles footsteps or whispered voices. Archaeologists confirm that these chambers were built with ingenuity, but the sensations reported by locals suggest that the tunnels retain more than physical history. They hold the memory of fear, survival, and death. Religious spaces within Derinkuyu add another layer to its mystique. Small chapels, adorned with carved crosses, indicate that early Christian communities used the city for worship and sanctuary. Locals believe that the prayers and faith of these early inhabitants linger in the air, sometimes manifesting as sudden warmth, faint light, or the impression of being watched. Shadows are occasionally reported by visitors, gliding along walls or ceilings and disappearing when approached, hinting at unseen presences within the tunnels. Excavations have revealed hidden frescoes and inscriptions in some chapels, suggesting that secret ceremonies were performed to protect inhabitants from invaders, adding to the sense that these tunnels held both spiritual and practical power. Even areas clearly excavated for practical purposes, such as storage rooms and stables, are tied to local stories of haunting. People recount doors closing without wind, objects shifting slightly overnight, or strange hissing sounds echoing down the corridors. Some claim to have felt hands brush against them in passages where no one else could fit. These experiences are often shared by locals as warnings, passed down through generations to prevent outsiders from venturing too far without guidance. Visiting Derinkuyu today takes you through a blend of engineering marvels, history, and enduring legends. The tunnels showcase remarkable ingenuity, yet they are filled with a sense of mystery and unease. For villagers nearby, the underground city is more than an archaeological site. It is a place where the echoes of past lives, fear, and survival persist, and where the living must tread carefully, aware that the darkness may still hold those who never return to the surface. The Skull Caves of Sulawesi, Indonesia. Used for ancient burial rituals, the Skull Caves of Sulawesi, Indonesia, reveal a long-forgotten chapter of the region's history, drawing both study and superstition from locals. Inside these caves, human remains are carefully arranged within alcoves and on rock ledges, some dating back thousands of years. Archaeologists have found that these practices were part of ceremonial traditions, likely connected to the Toraja people and their ancestors, who inhabited the region long before recorded history. Villagers still speak of the caves with caution, believing that the spirits of the dead linger among the shadows, watching and waiting. The caves are carved into limestone hills with narrow entrances that open into chambers filled with stalactites and uneven floors. Inside, visitors encounter the skeletal remains of adults and children, some partially wrapped or adorned with traces of cloth. Local legends claim that these were not simply burials, but places where the dead were honored, yet also bound to the living world until certain rituals were completed. Travelers who enter alone often report a suffocating stillness, an oppressive feeling as if the walls themselves are pressing inward. Many of the skulls display unusual modifications. Archaeologists have noted that some have small holes, possibly from ceremonial practices, while others show signs of careful cleaning and polishing. Villagers explain that these treatments were meant to preserve the spirit's strength or to prevent them from harming the living. On moonless nights, locals claim that faint chanting or whispers can be heard echoing from the chambers, even though no one is present. These sounds are attributed to the restless dead, whose presence remains woven into the cave's atmosphere. The Toraja people, famous for their elaborate funeral rites, have influenced the lore surrounding the caves. Their rituals often involve extended ceremonies and the preservation of bones, and some scholars suggest that the skull caves represent an earlier stage of these traditions. Elders say that spirits linger until proper respect is shown, and they caution outsiders not to disturb the bones. Tourists and researchers report sudden cold drafts and inexplicable movements in the shadows, reinforcing the local belief that the caves retain the energy of centuries of mourning and ceremony. One chamber in particular contains rows of skulls facing outward, as if observing anyone who enters. Archaeologists have dated these remains to between 20 and 30 years ago, suggesting long-standing traditions of ancestor worship in the region. Locals say that disrespecting these skulls, turning them, removing them, or even speaking loudly near them can bring illness, misfortune, or terrifying visions. Some have reported seeing shadowy figures among the skeletal remains or hearing footsteps where none could tread, evidence, they claim, that the spirits are still guarding the caves. Aside from the bones, the caves hold rock paintings and carvings that suggest the site's spiritual importance. These images, faded but still discernible, depict scenes of humans and animals intertwined, possibly representing relationships between the living and the dead. Villagers interpret these symbols as warnings or guidance, explaining that the caves are meant to be treated with reverence. Travelers often remark on the eerie silence, punctuated by distant echoing drips of water or the sudden rustling of unseen animals, each sound amplifying the sense that the caves are far from empty. Even paths leading to the caves carry their own legends. Dense vegetation and jagged rock formations make the journey treacherous, and locals say that those who approach without proper respect may encounter disorienting visions, sudden dizziness, or fleeting shadows that vanish when confronted. Some claim to have glimpsed human-like forms moving along ledges high above the ground, or glimpses of faces in the rock formations that seem almost alive. These stories are passed down through generations, ensuring that the skull caves are approached with both curiosity and caution. Experiencing the skull caves today means engaging with both their archaeological significance and the local traditions that surround them. The skeletal remains, ancient carvings, and natural formations create a space filled with history and lingering presence. For the people of Sulawesi, the caves are not simply relics of the past. They are sacred, dangerous, and alive with memory. Respect is demanded, and those who ignore the warnings may find themselves unsettled in ways that cannot be explained by science alone. The shunned ruins of Palenque, Mexico. Once a thriving Maya metropolis in Chiapas, Mexico, Palenque now stands as fragmented temples and pyramids, enveloped in dense vegetation that hints at centuries of abandonment. The city reached its height in the 7th century under rulers like Pakal the Great. Archaeologists have uncovered intricate carvings, palaces, and tombs that reveal the city's sophistication. Yet locals speak of the ruins with caution, believing that spirits of the past still linger and punish those who disrespect the site. The dense foliage and winding paths add to the sense of mystery, making each step feel like entering a world both alive and abandoned. In the 1950s, Pakal's tomb was discovered in the Temple of the Inscriptions, one of the most feared sites in Palenque. The tomb contained a sarcophagus with detailed carvings depicting Pakal's journey to the afterlife, as well as jade ornaments and funerary masks. Villagers claim that the spirits guarding the tomb are restless, and travelers who linger too long in the temple report sudden chills, disorientation, or the sense of being watched. Some have even spoken of shadowy figures appearing along the corridors, or the faint sound of footsteps where none could tread. Other structures in Palenque are shunned because of legends surrounding human sacrifice. The Temple of the Cross and Temple of the Sun, adorned with carved stelae, depict ritual ceremonies and offer insights into Maya cosmology. Locals warn that disturbing these temples, or even speaking loudly near them, can provoke the spirits of those who were sacrificed. Stories are told of people experiencing sudden dizziness, hearing whispers, or seeing fleeting shapes among the ruins, phenomena that are dismissed by outsiders as wind or animals, but taken seriously by the villagers. The city's palaces also carry an unsettling presence. The Palace of the Governor, with its tall corridors, narrow galleries, and hidden stairways, was the administrative heart of Palenque. Archaeological studies show that the building contained rooms for ceremonial gatherings, residential spaces, and even observatories for tracking celestial movements. Villagers believe that the souls of the city's leaders still linger here, guarding the knowledge and treasures of the past. Travelers occasionally report seeing figures in ancient attire moving silently along the long corridors, vanishing when approached, or sensing an oppressive weight in the air that makes breathing feel difficult. Water played a central role in the city's layout, with aqueducts, channels, and cisterns connecting different areas. These features were not only practical, but also sacred, linked to Maya beliefs about the underworld and the journey of the soul. Local legends hold that spirits of the dead use these waterways to travel between the realms, and some visitors claim to hear splashing or murmurs near cisterns when no water is present. These tales contribute to the city's reputation as a place where the living should tread lightly and show respect. Encircling Palenque, the jungle seems to guard and amplify its mysterious aura. Dense foliage and creeping vines can obscure paths, and wildlife sounds sometimes seem human or unnervingly quiet. Villagers say that some areas of the ruins are cursed, warning outsiders that the spirits of ancient priests, rulers, and sacrificial victims watch from the trees. Travelers have reported sudden shadows darting across the temples, fleeting figures disappearing among the stone carvings, and sensations of being followed while exploring the more remote areas of the site. Although Palenque has been studied for centuries, many areas have yet to be fully explored. Archaeologists continue to uncover hidden chambers, tombs, and inscriptions, each discovery shedding light on Maya civilization, but also adding to the air of mystery. Locals insist that the ruins are not merely historical sites, they are sacred and dangerous, inhabited by the echoes of past lives, power, and ritual. Visitors who approach Palenque with curiosity alone may leave feeling uneasy, as though the city itself remembers its history and watches over anyone who dares to enter. The shunned ruins of Palenque stand as a testament to the Mayas' skill, faith, and complexity, yet they also preserve the lingering presence of a city that time cannot fully silence. The temples, tombs, and palaces are filled with memory, legend, and a sense of caution that locals have respected for generations. For those who enter without understanding or reverence, Palenque is not merely a ruin, it is a place alive with the shadows of the past. The caves of Lascaux, France. In 1940, 4 teenagers stumbled upon a hidden network of chambers beneath the limestone cliffs of southwestern France, uncovering a treasure of prehistoric art that would astonish the world. The caves of Lascaux contain thousands of images painted on stone walls, including horses, aurochs, stags, and abstract symbols, some more than 1700 years old. These artworks offer a glimpse into the lives, beliefs, and rituals of early humans. Yet locals have long treated the site with caution, insisting that the spirits of those ancient artists still linger in the shadows. Visitors speak of an unsettling presence, as though the cave itself remembers and watches anyone who enters. The most famous section, called the Great Hall of the Bulls, features massive depictions of aurochs, stags, and horses, some reaching more than 5 meters in length. Archaeologists note that the artists used natural contours in the rock to enhance the realism of the animals, sometimes painting over older images to create layers of meaning. Locals report that even today, visitors occasionally feel an inexplicable presence, as if unseen eyes watch from the walls. Some describe hearing faint scratching or footsteps echoing through the narrow passages, though the caves have been closed to the public since 1963 to protect the fragile artwork. Smaller chambers contain more enigmatic images, including mysterious human-animal figures and symbols that researchers have struggled to interpret. Scholars have suggested that these might have had spiritual or ritual significance, possibly connected to hunting magic or ceremonies meant to ensure survival. Villagers tell stories of eerie lights appearing deep within the tunnels, or of sudden chills in areas that receive no airflow. They believe that the spirits of the ancient artists guard their creations, warning the living to approach with respect. To maintain air quality during rituals or artistic work, the cave's chambers, shafts, and ventilation system were likely utilized. Archaeological studies indicate that fire pits were present in some chambers, their smoke contributing to the patina that preserved the pigments. Locals say that faint smoke-like shapes sometimes appear along the walls, especially near the depictions of bulls and deer, as if the shadows of the past are still moving among the painted figures. These experiences have kept many from venturing beyond the replica caves at Lascaux II, built nearby in the 1980s. Footprints of adults and children were also found in the cave's soft chamber floors, suggesting collective activity or exploration. Some villagers claim that these footprints carry more than history. They say that visitors have felt themselves guided or nudged by unseen hands along the original paths, as if the ancient humans are silently overseeing those who enter. Even with strict preservation measures, stories persist of strange sounds, whispers, and sudden temperature changes that cannot be explained. Ritual activity is also evident within Lascaux. Certain panels appear to align with natural rock formations, and some paintings depict hunting scenes paired with abstract signs, hinting at spiritual beliefs. Villagers recount tales of hearing low hums or chanting when standing near particular figures, experiences that archaeologists cannot measure or confirm, but that remain vivid for those who witness them. These sensations contribute to the cave's reputation as a place that is both historically significant and mysteriously alive. Located deep in the Vézère Valley, the caves exude a strong sense of solitude and discomfort. Surrounded by forest and cliffs, the entrance is easily overlooked, and the paths leading to it can be treacherous. Local guides warn that the site has always demanded respect, not only for the preservation of art, but also because of the lingering presence of the ancient people who created it. Travelers have reported feeling sudden dizziness, shadows shifting along the walls, and whispers that vanish when approached. all reinforcing the belief that Lascaux is more than a prehistoric gallery, it is a sacred space. Stepping into Lascaux, the silence is almost tangible, broken only by the whispers of centuries-old paintings that seem to watch every movement. Preserved on fragile rock canvases, these cave paintings testify to human creativity and ritual practice, yet local stories remind visitors that the site is not entirely silent. For those who enter the caves, it feels as if the past itself is watching, with the spirits of the artists lingering among painted bulls, deer, and mysterious symbols, guiding, guarding, and silently observing every step taken within these ancient halls. The tombs of Myra, Turkey. In the town of Demre, Turkey, the cliffs along the Mediterranean reveal a series of ancient rock-cut tombs that have stood for over 2,000 years. Carved by the Lycian civilization, these tombs display intricate reliefs of warriors, animals, and mythological scenes, offering a glimpse into the beliefs and rituals of a long-lost culture. Archaeologists have found evidence of offerings placed near the entrances, suggesting that the Lycian people believed the dead could influence the living. Some tombs even contain multiple burial chambers, hinting at generations of families honoring their ancestors in secret rituals. Yet locals have always regarded them with caution, claiming that the spirits of the dead linger within the stone chambers. Travelers speak of sudden chills, shadowy movements, and whispers that seem to come from the walls themselves, as though the tombs are watching those who approach. From basic rectangular chambers to grand multi-roomed tombs featuring columns and pediments, the tombs vary greatly in design and scale. Archaeologists note that the carvings often depict scenes of daily life, warriors, and mythological figures, suggesting a deep connection between the living and the dead. Local lore claims that disturbing these tombs can awaken the spirits of those entombed, leading to misfortune or illness. Travelers occasionally report hearing footsteps echoing from the tomb interiors, even when no one else is present. Famous for the lion reliefs that protect its entrance, the lion's tomb stands out among the tombs. Built in the 4th century BCE, it demonstrates the skill and artistry of Lycian masons. Villagers say that the lions are more than decoration, they are protectors, their spirits still warding against intruders. Some visitors have reported sudden chills near the tomb, accompanied by faint growls or the sense of being watched. These experiences reinforce the belief that the tombs are not merely historical sites, but active presences in the landscape. The cliffs themselves contribute to the ominous atmosphere. Narrow paths lead to each tomb, often with sheer drops on either side, making the journey perilous even in daylight. Locals warn that approaching the tombs without respect or caution can bring bad luck, and some refuse to venture near them after sunset. Archaeologists have found evidence of offerings left at the entrances, possibly meant to appease spirits or ensure safe passage for the living. Travelers report that even today, small stones or coins placed in these spots vanish overnight, fueling stories of unseen guardians. Inside the tombs, chambers often open into long, dark passages with carved niches and remnants of funerary artifacts. The Lycian approach to death emphasized honoring the deceased with elaborate tombs, yet the silence inside these spaces is heavy and suffocating. Visitors sometimes describe a sense of pressure or weight, as though the air itself remembers centuries of funerals and mourning. Some have reported hearing whispers in languages they cannot understand, or feeling a hand brush their shoulder, though no one else is nearby. Layers of successive burials in some tombs indicate, through archaeological evidence, that they were reused over generations. This practice may have reinforced the connection between the living and the dead, but villagers suggest it also created restless spirits. Legends tell of children or travelers who ignored local warnings and entered the tombs alone, only to emerge disoriented or frightened, claiming to have seen shadowy figures or glowing eyes in the darkness. These tales have persisted for centuries, keeping the tombs shrouded in caution and superstition. The Lycian rock-cut tombs are not the only structures in the area with a supernatural reputation. Ruins of amphitheatres, ancient streets, and sarcophagi scattered throughout Myra are said to carry echoes of the past, and some locals avoid walking the paths alone after dark. Scholars have documented that the tombs positioning on cliffs may have been intended for visibility and protection, yet it also gives them an imposing and intimidating presence that dominates the landscape. Many visitors report feeling a constant awareness of being observed, a sensation that seems to cling to the tombs long after leaving the site. Centuries of research have not diminished the eerie allure of Myra's tombs, which continue to captivate visitors. Their carved facades and dark interiors reveal a civilization deeply concerned with death, honor, and the afterlife. For the people of Demre, the tombs are far more than archaeological treasures. They are sacred, powerful, and inhabited by the lingering presence of those who built and were buried within them. The Whispering Walls of Petra, Jordan. In the rugged canyons of southern Jordan, the ancient city of Petra emerges from red sandstone cliffs, carved by the Nabateans over 2,000 years ago. Known as the Rose City for its hue, Petra was once a thriving center of trade, connecting Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. Travelers moving through the narrow Seek, the winding gorge that leads to the city, often speak of the unusual echoes that bounce off the walls. Locals believe these echoes are not just sound, but whispers of the past, as though the city itself remembers and communicates with those who pass through. Petra's most iconic structure, Al-Khazna, or the Treasury, stands like a monumental face carved into the cliff. Its facade, adorned with intricate columns and sculptures, is thought to have been a royal tomb, or perhaps a temple. Villagers tell stories that the treasury holds more than stone. Some claim that the spirits of ancient Nabatean rulers linger within, observing all who enter. Visitors have described feeling sudden cold spots near the entrance, hearing murmurs that vanish when approached, and glimpsing shadows where none should be. These experiences have reinforced Petra's reputation as a city alive with memory. Ad-Dair, the monastery, sits high above the treasury on a plateau, accessible only after a 1,000-step ascent. The path itself is steep and exposed, and the sheer cliffs surrounding it create natural corridors for wind and sound. Locals say that the wind carries voices of those who lived and died in Petra, and that sometimes the canyon walls seem to answer back. Scholars explain some of these sounds as natural echoes and gusts, yet even they admit that the way noises twist and shift is unlike anywhere else, and the effect is both unnerving and mesmerizing. Throughout the city, tombs and dwellings are carved from the rock, each bearing its own legends and history. Some facades are decorated with human figures and symbols, thought to represent gods, ancestors, or protective spirits. Local guides recount tales of travelers who hear soft chanting near the tombs, especially in the evening when the canyon shadows grow long. Others speak of footsteps echoing along empty corridors, or of seeing faint shapes glide past the carved doorways. These stories have been passed down for generations, shaping the way the local Bedouin communities relate to Petra. Water management was essential to Petra's survival, and the Nabateans built aqueducts, cisterns, and channels that still function today. Some of these subterranean systems lead through dark tunnels carved under the cliffs. Locals warn that these areas are particularly sensitive, claiming that the spirits of workers or ancestors linger in the narrow passages. Travelers report sudden drops in temperature, strange drafts, and whispers that seem to come from the walls themselves. Even with flashlights and guides, some feel compelled to move quickly, as if invisible eyes are watching. The spiritual essence of Petra complements its importance as an archaeological site. Ancient inscriptions, graffiti, and carvings reveal the city's history of worship, trade, and daily life. Yet villagers insist that the city's energy cannot be measured by science alone. The echoes, sudden movements, and whispers they speak of are considered a natural part of the city's character, reminders of the people who built it and the lives they led. Some locals perform small rituals or leave offerings near tomb entrances, believing this shows respect and appeases lingering spirits. The isolation of the city still amplifies its air of mystery. The desert winds sweep through the canyons, sometimes carrying voices that vanish into silence. Travelers ascending the trails to less visited tombs describe feeling watched and hearing their names called, though no one is nearby. Petra's stone corridors and open courtyards, shaped by centuries of trade and devotion, seem to hold memories that are far older than any living person. For those who enter the city, the walls do more than reflect sound, they echo the whispers of a civilization that continues to leave its mark on all who walk among its cliffs. The whispering walls of Petra serve as both a historical marvel and a haunting presence. Carved with skill and reverence, the city is a living record of Nabatean life. Yet it is also a place where echoes, shadows, and voices remind visitors that the past has not fully left. For the Bedouin who live nearby, these whispers are more than legend, they are proof that Petra watches, listens, and holds the memory of its people in every stone.